That's a good point. Um, but I think, man, what was I gonna say? So, but yeah, in and out. It's sometimes it's like the most amazing thing. Sometimes it's like I haven't looked at this book in like a couple of months, and it's just every time I read it, I forgot everything.
Mm-hmm.
Word here and there, maybe, and it's just like we'll have to kind of do this over again. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but um, while you were in it though, what's your approach to studying the language?
Okay, so one of the biggest challenges we have with learning languages like California languages is there's just not a lot of material that you have to work with. So I'd studied the textbook, take notes on the grammar, but most of the value comes from the text because those show you what it's like to really speak and put words and sentences together. So I'd go through those texts and I'd take very detailed notes on each line of them, trying to glean every bit of information I could out of them. And I found that I got a lot more from studying those texts than was actually written in the explicit grammar sections of the textbook.
Hmm.
There are so many little details you pick up on that aren't necessarily written out anywhere. So anyway, I do that, and then I balance that with a bit of writing as well, because that's just good for practice and reinforcing your vocabulary. And also, I wanted to create some material that other people could use when they try to learn the language. Because, like I said, we don't have a lot of material, so I'm trying to make it easier for future learners by creating some material of my own that they can use as reading practice.
When you would write, would you try to write your own thoughts into the language? So like it's kind of like your little like journal per se of just like your own thoughts in the language.
Once in a while, I'd write something akin to a journal, but in general, it takes so much time and energy to write something just uh, so that it's all correct. You have to look up individual words and make sure you're using the right word and the right form, and not to mention the word order and the grammar.
Mhm.
There's a lot that goes into it. So I tried to. So I didn't really write the daily journals, but I'd more whenever I felt inspired to write about a certain topic, like it could be a story or some experience, some anecdote. I'd write stuff like that.
Okay. Because I think that's like another thing that I try my best to do when it comes to learning any language, regardless if it's California Indigenous or otherwise, is once I kind of have some vocabulary under my belt, once I kind of have a glimpse of the grammar and I'm understanding some of it, is try to write something down, right? Like something that's of my own thoughts. Because even if for me, like in the beginning, especially if I go back to like my old Serrano books, like I look at that, I'm like, okay, I said this wrong, and this doesn't make sense. But I kind of take that as like a screenshot of where I was at that time and kind of where I'm at now. So even though that some of those things are not 100% grammatically correct or I use the wrong word, it's just I wanted to put like something on paper, you know.
Mhm.
That way you're really in absorbing the language. So I think because I think I had a on my channel I had a couple of just like random thoughts. Like I have a video of like I wrote something about my mom speaking bad Serrano
Mhm.
and stuff like that because she would make fun of me um
Mhm.
um about like it sounds like I was saying, even though she doesn't speak Serrano.
Yeah, no, I've heard of you talking about that journaling, and it sounds like an excellent idea. Uh, I think what I do instead on a day-to-day basis is just talk to myself in the language, because it's like a lot of us talk to ourselves anyway, so you might as well do it in your target language and get some practice out of it. And on the plus side, when people hear you, they won't know what you're thinking about. So I can be complaining about my coworker and what stupid thing he's doing, and he won't take any offense to it.
Is so do you do you use it like that? That's
Yeah, a little bit.
I
Mm.
mean like I see that all the time. Like I mean granted like that's like my job is to for the Serrano and stuff, but my coworkers don't speak Serrano, so I can just like like say something or and stuff like that, and it's kind of like I understand what I'm saying. I'm getting it out regardless. It's just even if you don't understand me, I'm getting it out.
Mhm.
Um, so it's nice to kind of have that. But speaking or like writing, has there been any like techniques or anything that you've tried but haven't worked for you?
Uh, it's an interesting question. Um, no, I'm not sure that there have been. I mean, I can tell you what doesn't work for me is flashcards,
I
trying to
was
just memorize stuff that way.
I was just about to say like
This,
flashcards. I've tried. It's kind of a more traditional way of studying anything,
mm,
and it just doesn't work for me. Um,
yeah,
I
really anything that I'll get bored of, I'll just stay away from. So I can't tell you if it's worked or not because I just haven't done it. Uh, I'll I'll take the route of least resistance and just do whatever's fun to me. And if that means postponing learning certain things, then that's fine. For example, I totally shunned kinship terms for the longest time. Uh, I was like, it's kind of complicated. I'll save it for later. But gradually, I find ways to include more and more of those things just by starting with the simplest terms like father and mother, and then sister, people in your own family. Then you can bring it in and gradually start adding on to it. And then before you know them all, and you didn't have to exert uh, any effort in studying them.
that's actually I haven't thought about it that way because like when I teach like family and stuff like that, I always try my like just like the immediate family,
Mhm.
mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, and stuff like that. And then I feel like I give too much at one time because then they're gonna say, well, "What about aunt and then uncle?" And it's like, well, then I have to kind of explain to them like, well, if it's your aunt, is it your mom's older sister, or your mom's younger sister? And it's just like then it gets too complicated.
Yeah.
So I think your approach of kind of starting very small and then building that way, kind of outwards like that. I think that's actually I never thought about it that way. And I think I'm
Well, the key
reflecting
is
on what I did and like I made a mistake.
no, it's okay. The key is to use the words in context. You know, start talking about your mother and your father and his mother and her father, and just incorporate it into your conversation because you need the repetition. For sure, you can't just look at the word once and expect to remember it. You have to talk about it, bring it up later on. That way it'll get reinforced.
True, true. So I know on your channel, which everyone should go check out, for sure. Um, you also have like a background in Latin.
Hmm.
and um, and for people that are might not be outside of like the language learning circle, Latin might seem like the hardest language in existence because it's like for smart people and things like that. Um, so kind of, and I've tried to study Latin. I tried to study Latin. And it's definitely different, but and it could be difficult because it's different, right? You have all the cases and then like the
That's a big
declensions and
leap from all of its modern descendants.
yeah. So I know that Latin and Kumeyaay, you can't compare the two,
Oh,
but
yes, you can.
I'm open to hear about it.
Yeah, actually, believe it or not, one of the reasons I like Kumeyaay so much is because it reminded me so much of Latin. Okay, so what are the essential characteristics of Latin? It has a case system, which means the words have endings that tell you what they're doing in the sentence, which allows you to switch up the word order, and you'll still know what's going on because you just look at the suffixes or the endings of the words to tell you what it's doing. Um, and another thing is, besides that, it has a standard or default word order, which is subject, object, verb. That happens to be the same as Kumeyaay, subject, object, verb. But Kumeyaay's, it makes it even better because it's simpler. Okay, so subject, object, verb, and the subject has a marker if it's the subject. Otherwise, you don't have to worry about too many other sets of suffixes. And then uh, for the verbs, uh, conjugating verbs is dead easy. It's glottal stop for me, M for you, and W or nothing for he or she. So that's Kumeyaay grammar in a nutshell, and it, it really doesn't get a lot more complicated than that.
I mean, that's always nice, right?
Mhm.
Um, but if you had to say in terms of difficulty, kind of like in a broad sense, uh, how difficult would you say it is? Besides, like the no one to speak to and stuff like that, because I understand that makes it 10 times more difficult. But just like as the language is and things like that.
Mhm. So Kumeyaay, my Kumeyaay professor at Kumeyaay Community College, where you can take a Kumeyaay class, uh, his name is Dr. Stan Rodriguez, and he on our first day in class, he explained to us Kumeyaay is complex in its simplicity. And he said it's complicated in its simpleness. So basically it's very simple, but that's also the challenge of it. Uh, you kind of expect that there would be more, and there's not. So you have to pay close attention to the little details to tell you what's going on. But I'd have to say overall, uh, it's not a hard language. Uh, there are a few sounds you have to learn that aren't in English, but they aren't too hard to master. And you have the benefit of no tones. It's just like English, no tones you have to worry about. The stress pattern is very consistent and predictable. So pronunciation is no big deal as long as you have the resources. And then the grammar, it's beautiful. I love it because, like I said, you use the same prefixes for person every time, and they don't change much depending on which verb you're using. Generally, you can just stick them onto any verb, just right on top, and it'll work. And coming from a language like Latin, that's such a relief because with Latin we have all these different cases, and then we have all these different declensions, which means that for each case, the word will inflect differently based on which declension it belongs to. So you have to memorize all these things, and it gets so complicated and takes a really long time. But with Kumeyaay, you just need to remember like 3 basic prefixes and you just stick them on. So it's great. And really, if anyone out there is curious about Native American languages, they want to learn one because it would be cool, I would really recommend Kumeyaay because it's so easy um, and approachable. You know, anyone can do it.
Yeah, I think because like I've heard Kumeyaay in terms of like on the recordings and stuff like that. And what you're kind of explaining to me, it probably sounds a lot harder than it is.
Yeah, probably.
Because like for Serrano, Serrano has a lot of the R-colored vowels and stuff like that, a lot of that, and it makes the language sound really hard,
Hmm.
and compared to like the languages, I mean the languages around Serrano, like Korea and all those that don't have that feature. But once like I kind of people take the time to sit down and like, hey, let me explain, like, how do we conjugate a verb and stuff like that. It's like, oh, that's it. So it's
Hmm.
like, you know, kind of in the same boat, but I think Kumeyaay is easier than Serrano in that instance. Um, but I kind of wanted to ask you because I'm kind of out of the loop in terms of Kumeyaay. I'm
Hmm.
kind of more on the outside than you are. What's like the state of the language in terms of like people still speaking it today?
Okay. So it's there are large differences based on which dialect you're talking about. So uh, Kumeyaay has a ton of different dialects. Some linguists will class them as different languages, although culturally they're kind of treated as the same language. So north of the border, uh, there are just a handful of native speakers, and then there's a few dozen young people who are interested in working on learning. Uh, South of the border, there are more speakers, uh, and I believe the total reported by uh, my teacher, Dr. Rodriguez, I believe it was like 45, but that number might be lower as of
Mhm.
this point in time.
Is
So,
I know that as we talked about earlier, Dr. Landon's work on the Messi Grande
mhm.
of dialect is is that part of that number, or is that one really low as well?
No, as uh, I don't know myself who was the last speaker of Mesa Grande, but I'm pretty sure there are no remaining
Hmm.
speakers. Yeah, because as of as of the time of her writing her grammar, which I believe she published in, or at least finished in 1966, she actually said, this dialect is moribund, and the only ones who speak it are in their 80s, and her own consultants hadn't spoken in Kumeyaay in years by the time she worked with them. So it's incredible that it was already on its way out when she was doing this work all that time ago.
And like it is quite amazing. And I didn't know that about her informants, that they hadn't spoken the language in as you mentioned, years.
What she said.
And for the work that came out of those sessions, it's I think it is quite amazing to what they were able to remember and to speak, especially if they didn't
That's
use
true.
it.
That's true because this dictionary, it looks small, but I'll tell you, it's very thorough. it has a ton of verbs. It might not have that many nouns, names of things and objects, but I think based on everything I've seen from Kumeyaay, that's just because the language doesn't have a lot of nouns. It relies largely on verbs. And if you want to refer to an object, if it doesn't have a name already, then you describe what it's doing or what you're doing with it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, this dictionary, it has a whole lot of incredibly specific verbs. And I found that it even contains words that aren't in the later dictionary, which is right here. This is the Verona Intertribal Dictionary. It came out in 2008. And this one, it looks like it would have way more words than this one. And it does have more, but largely that's because it covers 3 dialects in detail. And also everything's in large print, and there are tons of different variants of each word, and it has example sentences, et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of reasons why this one is bigger, but it doesn't necessarily contain a lot more words than this one.
Mm. Yeah, I think a good, especially if you have any dictionary, learning how to use it and learning and try to optimize how you use it would be key. Because as you mentioned, it might look very thin and stuff like that, but if you know how to use it, then you can make absolutely the most out of it. So I agree with you there. Um, so would you? No, I'm just kind of curious. Would you like to talk about anything or?
Sure, let me just go through my process of what I do if I want to say something in Kumeyaay or if I want to write something. So first of all, of course, I'll get an idea of what I want to say, and then just see what I can do based on what I know already. I'll reference my grammar notes or any examples in Let's Talk Ipaya. But when it comes to actual vocabulary, that's when I'll go to this dictionary. If you want to find something in English, of course, use the English to Kumeyaay part, which is in the back. But then once you've found a Kumeyaay word here, you have to get its specific definition by looking it up in the Kumeyaay section. So this is really important because in this dictionary, if you happen to use it, the Kumeyaay to English section will have the most detailed and accurate translation of the word. And that's what makes this one unique, because it has that section. This dictionary here isn't quite as detailed when you go from Kumeyaay to English. Okay, it's mostly best for English to Kumeyaay. So let's say I find a word in here, but since this dictionary doesn't really have example sentences, I don't really know how it's used in a sentence. Like, is this an auxiliary verb? Can it go with another verb? And if it does that other verb need to take a certain affix? These are the kind of questions you'll come up with. So for that, then you turn to the Verona dictionary. You can look up the word, and then below you can look in the example sentences, and that'll show you how the word's actually used. Now, one thing that might be challenging for anyone who tries to use this dictionary is that it combines vastly different dialects. Okay, so, and a lot of the examples are from the southern dialects called Tipai, and it'll look really foreign to an Ipai learner, which was me. So at first, it's pretty difficult to read those sentences, but the more I study it, the more I realized that they're similar. They're really similar, and they have a lot of the same root words. In Tipai, they just tend to be shorter most of the time.
Mm.
And then you can use the Tipai example sentences to show you how to use the Ipai word, because Kumeyaay largely has the same grammar across all the dialects. That's the cool thing about it, and that's why uh, culturally they sort of see it as one language, because they might use different words for things, but the grammar is the same, the pronunciation is the same. A lot of the affixes are the exact same. Now, of course, that's generalizing, and if you study, you'll see a huge amount of differences even in the grammar between the dialects. But in general, you can use those sentences to help guide you, even if you're learning Ipai, the northern dialects.
Okay. That's that's good. That's actually that's pretty good to that's really good to know. Um, so as of today,
Mhm.
um, where would you say? Because I know like in California indigenous languages, there's no like A1, B2, all those things. Where would you say you're at, like, if we had to create that kind of scale?
Um, I'd be a lot better if I had people I could talk to. Um, but the thing is, a lot of my knowledge is passive. It's just kind of sitting there, and I don't get to exercise it much. I do go to class and talk as much as I can with people, but uh, I wouldn't really be comfortable saying a whole lot of stuff that I know they won't understand. Uh, so maybe I'd put myself at uh, probably B2 in terms of reading and writing, for
Hmm.
sure, and listening comprehension to a certain extent. Uh, my speaking might not be all there, but anyway, uh, I'm working every day on my vocabulary, um, just going over words, and really the challenge in the long term is going to be putting these words into use, especially the verbs,
Hmm.
because Kumeyaay is so descriptive in its verbs and its actions. It's like the people behind this language had such a clear conception of movements and actions and how you do things. So if you want to carry something, uh, it's different depending on how you carry it. Okay, so if I'm carrying something in a hanging position like a bucket, that's called bemish, bemish. And if you're carrying something in your arms, that's called hiyan, hiyan. Uh, and then if you're carrying something on your back, that's wiyich, wiyich. So things like that. And there are lots of words that have these different variants like that. So
So where would you say um the future of the Kumeyaay language where and the classes or the
mhm.
community, or even for yourself in the work that you're doing, to create things for the Kumeyaay language, where do you kind of see it, or where do you have good hopes for revitalization and people learning it?
So I have a lot of faith in the potential for Kumeyaay to have a future. Uh, but really, it's not in my hands whatsoever. Everything that I do, it might have absolutely no effect on the outcome. Um, but there are a lot of people who are interested and actively working on learning. Um, I know there are a whole lot of efforts going on south of the border, but north of the border, I know personally a few people who are interested and working on it. Some are studying directly under Dr. Rodriguez, and some are kind of doing their own thing. But yeah, it's really up to the Kumeyaay people and where they want to take this. But it'll mostly be an individual effort. If you want to learn this, then you really got to put in the work. And I'll say it is possible if you really want it. People just have to really want it, and they need to make it a priority in their lives. That they will do this, they will work at it until they get it. Now, I think it can appear to be a daunting task because people don't know where to begin. They aren't familiar with the resources that are out there, which really are pretty hard to get to. Because, we were just talking about the textbook and how it's been out of print for decades since it came out. I don't want to know how much you paid for your copy, but otherwise you'd have to go to university libraries and check it out, and most people can't even do that. You have to be enrolled to check it out. Otherwise, you can try to sneak on campus. Maybe they'll have it.
I've
Or
done
maybe
that.
they
I've done
won't.
that.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
there's so many hoops you have to jump through. But I'm telling you, if you really want it, you can do it. And in the meantime, I'm working hard to make more resources available and just make this process easier for people so that if they do want it, then they can do it. It will be possible for them.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's having that spark, having that desire to do it, because you can, if it's kind of like a passive interest, you might not catch on, or you might not really get as much as you like or learn as much as you like. But if you have that, in you to try to learn and try your best to um capture the language and be in, even like be involved somewhat, like you're taking classes or making resources for future learners. It's that's by drive, and that's by that spark that you to the desire to do it. So I applaud you, and I appreciate the work that you do. I watch your material, and whenever you do post videos or even watch um, past ones. So
Mhm.
thank you for making that available, because I myself watch it, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And one thing I've been doing lately is I've been trying to reach out to individual people um, who I know within the Kumeyaay community who are interested in the language and seem to have potential. And I've found, several of them that have an interest in the language, and they've made decent progress in the language to where I know they can do this. They can become fluent if they just work at it. So I've been bugging them a little bit uh, to study more, uh, trying to get them to practice with me. But I know they have a lot of things going on in their lives. So I just want to put this out there that if there are any people out there to whom Kumeyaay is your heritage language, I'm willing to work with anyone who's interested in learning Kumeyaay. I'll connect you with any resource that's out there, help you with anything. Just reach out to me because I really want to see this language succeed. And that's the whole point of me doing this, really. My teacher says Knowledge without sharing is not really knowledge. So whatever I happen to know just from picking it up, I don't want to keep it to myself. I want to make it available to anyone who wants it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's I also follow that philosophy. Mr. Siva taught me that you it's what you know, what I teach you, you share it with who wants to know, even if it's, anything. Of course, I don't know everything, but what I do know, I'm always happy to tell, like, hey, this is the word for this and things like that if I remember it. So I totally agree with Dr. Rodriguez's philosophy on that. Um, so thank you, Vincent, for coming on. Everybody, go check out his channel, his material, what he puts on YouTube, and also, what's your name of that website that you created?
So I've an Instagram page called Kakwarkwar. So
I'll make
you
sure to
can
put that in
just
description so people can go to that.
find me that. That means the talkative one. Ironically, I'm not very talkative, but Kakwarkwar. I'll 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 show you how it's spelled after.
Yeah. So yeah, everyone go follow him, subscribe to his channel, go watch his material. Thank you again, Vincent, for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
All right. I'll see you later, everybody. You all take care now.